All right, welcome everybody, and welcome back to the show. And wow, I'm so delighted because we have a very special panel interview dedicated to the guitar and other instruments in the guitar family, like the theorbo, the Baroque guitar, the lute. And we have three experts and people that I admire, and they're really great, perfect for this panel. We have the great Brandon Acker, we have Nicola Pignatiello, we have Austin Culler, so many wonderful people. And we're going to spend the next hour just focusing on that great instrument, the guitar, and its related family. So, welcome, everybody. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi, thanks, Nikhil.
Well, how about we just do a very brief introduction to everyone? Maybe we'll go clockwise. So, Brandon, why don't you just give yourself a brief introduction and we'll start there.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon Acker. I am a guitarist, lutenist. I frequently play early music. So most of my professional concerts these days are playing theorbo, arch lute, baroque guitar, and continuo. That's what I'm doing right now, actually. I'm in Cleveland playing with Apollo's Fire. And I also run an online music school, Arpeggiato. I'm a YouTuber. And love all things counterpoint, continuo, and now I'm getting into Partimento, thanks to Nicola and your podcast, Nikhil. So this is really exciting. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. And Austin, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a classical guitarist out of Alberta, Canada. I play kind of everything, so I'm not a continuo specialist. Like I don't play the lute or the theorbo. So a lot of my training's been in, your kind of standard performance. But over the last few years, I've been working on Partimenti and really looking at a lot of the 19th century guitar literature. So a lot of the music I play is the Romantic era, so Burgundy, Nerds, Giuliani. But certainly not limited to that. But I just kind of love everything guitar, and I love using the creative element of music, not just the performance element. So that's where Partimenti and improvisation, composition, all that stuff really comes together.
Wonderful. And Nicola, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Nicola Pignatiello. I live in Rome, Italy. I'm a guitarist and a lutenist. Let's say I share my concert career quite half and half with guitar and the theorbo and baroque guitar. And since some years, I'm investigating into Partimento, and that's why I'm here. And we already been on this podcast because I started doing Partimenti on the guitar, and it's something I love doing because I love also music education, and I think it was something really good for the music education in general.
Wonderful. And music education is maybe the best place to start, because I think so many people are introduced to classical guitar, and classical guitar is quite popular to start off the guitar education. I know when I was young, I liked the Beatles, but my parents probably said, you know what, maybe learn the guitar properly. So learn some classical guitar, you'll get the best, you'll get fingering, you get all of that, you get technique. And so my introduction to the guitar was classical guitar. But let's start with education. So I'm very curious, let's talk about that topic. Something that was non-existent in my early education in classical guitar was basso continuo. Nothing. It was all performance based essentially. And in Asia, we have exams, and so we have RCM, Trinity, ABRSM exams. So generally, the culture is purely based towards recitals and competitions, almost completely. And my guitar teacher never forget about Partimento, but not even basso continuo or accompaniment. And I always looked at my rock guitar playing friends and my songwriting friends, and they all seemed to be doing creative things, but I was playing repertoire, beautiful repertoire, of course, but I didn't quite understand it. It just seemed like a sphinx. So I'm curious to the panel. So this is a question to the panel regarding basso continuo. Were any of you introduced in any way to basso continuo in your early education, or is that something you picked up later? Or these concepts essentially, did that ever occur in the early days of your education on the guitar? Maybe we could start with Brandon. We'll just go clockwise.
No, it was a completely foreign concept to me, and I also started in rock playing, so I did have that creative, start of you just get together and you just play, you improvise. Someone does something and you respond, and so it did kind of start from rock music. I was almost closer to it then than I was in my conservatory degrees, in the sense of improvising, thinking about what chord works with this note. But then I like to say that my improvisational skills sort of atrophied during my 2 degrees in classical guitar, because as you said, you focused entirely on technique, on interpretation, and on playing well in recitals. And I had to rediscover improvisation in an early style during my degrees, as I went to early music festivals and started playing lutes and was fascinated. But I did find that my rock background and knowing what chords work and what key, it helped me. It's the same, 1, 4, 5. It's still true. It still works. But no, it's completely absent, and it's one of the things I'd love to see change. I think your podcast is doing something to help that. I think Nicola's Partimento book that he published is going to help. But I think this needs to be as important. The idea of improvising and accompanying should be obvious as guitarists. So hopefully we can change that. But I'll let the next person share their experience.
Yeah, Austin, didn't you recently complete your master's degree?
Yeah, I just finished my master's.
Okay.
So my background is probably quite similar to Brandon's. I didn't start as a classical guitarist. Started as doing rock or like contemporary, various punk shows in basements, those sorts of things. But with all that kind of stuff, it's that creative element's always in the forefront. So really similar. I went to study classical guitar when I kind of felt like I was hitting a bit of I wanted to study it seriously, and classical guitar is one of the main things that is offered. At least it's more common around where I am, anyways. Which for me was good because I needed some of the technical. I needed to actually improve my technique. I've always had quite a bit of facility, but it definitely wasn't refined. So there was no basso continuo training or during any of the programs I had. So yeah, I spent that time mostly just kind of learning how to play the instrument properly and playing it well. And then I kind of rediscovered it once I think my level hit a certain point that I could, I wasn't so bogged down and constantly, improving technique and whatnot. So it was in the last few years. And then as far as like when I was teaching a little bit in my master's at the university here, we introduced I spearheaded a couple for the guitar studio, learning how to do basso continuo, a couple, basic, called it fretboard harmony, which is often what I hear things called in North America. So I started trying to do a little bit of that, but one of the things I found was that the minimum level to get into it, or the minimal gap of knowledge. So even something as simple as knowing where the notes are on your guitar. I mean, the guitarists in the studio could read notes, but it wasn't like not everybody had the instrument fully, under the command of where all the notes are. So even just beginning to get into some of the stuff like basso continuo, I had a pretty big challenge with it because the gap you have to get to just kind of get your foot in the door, on top of a lot of people learning technique. It made some challenges, but albeit worth it. But it was one of the things I noticed when trying to introduce some of the stuff into the program.
Yeah, and could I just quickly ask, when you said you spearheaded some things, when did you discover basso continuo on the classical guitar, that it was a thing?
On the guitar, I guess I didn't really think about it much. like as the guitar separately. So I discovered Giorgio Sanguinetti's book and Yardigan's book, 2018, I think. And I looked at it, I didn't quite take it seriously until a few years later. But I guess I didn't really think about it until I talked to Nicola, and I realized that, doing it on guitar is actually quite a bit of a different thing. I was just like, oh yeah, I got to learn how to do all this stuff on the guitar. So whenever we did analyses or various things, I was pretty used to reading piano scores and putting it on the guitar. So I guess I didn't think about it till later, till I had to explain it and teach it a little bit more. That you're like, this is actually a bit of a different beast. So I guess I kind of came from the assumption that you just kind of something you have to do, so it doesn't really matter if it's on the guitar or not. You have to learn how to. It's your instrument, so make it work, I guess.
Yeah. Nicola, tell me. So, the class Basso Continuo. I guess you're in Italy, so maybe that's you have so much heritage around you, right? So, early music it exists, not so much in Singapore, but I'm sure in Italy you were probably exposed to that. So, when did classical guitar and Basso Continuo? Was that always there, or is that something that you had to add to your skill set?
My story is very, very similar to the ones of Austin and Brandon, because my first guitar teacher was a blues guitarist. I grew up in a really tiny village on a mountain of 2,000 people in the south of Italy. So there was only one guitarist, and he was a bluesman. So I started with the guitar, and I felt that I started to study classical guitar because I was looking for something more than 1-4-5. Because with blues, I felt like I was doing always the same things. And I started classical guitar, but as also Bretton said, at the end of my classical studies, I felt like my creativity was, atrophied, was like dying. And I discovered Basso Continuo, much later. I was like 20 something. In the school, in the conservatory, we had a course like a side course. It was a project with the flute class to do Basso Continuo on the guitar on some Telemann sonatas. And when I started doing, I had a lot of fun, and I felt like I was reconnecting all my knowledge of chords from also a lot of experience as a young boy of songwriting, these kind of things. And I was thinking maybe more like alphabeto for the barrel guitar. You don't really do counterpoint, you just use positions and chords. But I had a lot of fun, and then since then I never stopped, because I really felt that I was starting understanding music. I felt it was something like a missing piece I needed in my life in music.
Yeah, that's really interesting that almost all of us have this kind of the similar path. It's kind of funny, but that's just how maybe it's a consequence maybe of our circumstances, the age, the era we're in, and that's very, very interesting. And so let's keep going with that. So I just want to continue on that theme, which is also now, what about Partimento, which is kind of like, in a way, there's overlap with Basso Continuo. Some people almost consider it is Basso Continuo. Partimento, they think of Basso Continuo as this large umbrella term that encompasses almost everything. So what about Partimento? Austin, you mentioned that when you found the book of Professor Giorgio Sanguinetti. So let's go in reverse, Nicola. Partimento on the guitar, when did that become a thing for you? Like the concept of applying this historical keyboard technique, and because a lot of people, the $1 million question is, can this be done on the guitar in the first place? I mean, is this something we even bother with on the guitar? Is this just a keyboard thing? And how did these great composers like Giuliani and Sor, just reams and reams of music, just out of their pen, did they have some kind of similar training? So let's start with Partimento, the topic then. So when did you discover the topic on the guitar, the classical guitar?
It was 2011. Yeah, it was like 12 years ago. I was with Enrico Baiano, and he's such a wonderful musician. He was improvising things, and I asked, how can you do this kind of things in Baroque music? And he told me, there is this kind of thing, Partimenti, they are pretty unknown for everybody now, but the things is hitting up. And well, I started searching things for guitars that maybe some guitarist, uh, published something in the past for the guitar. So I searched and searched, and there was nothing. And I also went to, as I live in Rome, I went to Giorgio Sanguinetti in Tor Vergata to ask him in person, hi professor, I'm looking for a guitar Partimenti, do you know anything? Because his book was published, I think, in 2012, the year after. So it was just the beginning of everything, and he told me, no, there's nothing for guitar. So at some point, as I often do with problems in my life, I say, okay, let's suppose there is Partimento for guitar. I do this abstract, I have this kind of reason, I say, of thinking about things. I say, okay, let's imagine that there are Partimento for guitar. How can we do it? So I started, making just little experiments from basso continuo to Partimenti, trying to arrange little things by Fenaroli, and and let's say step by step. At the end, it was during the pandemic. I started uploading some little videos, some realization on YouTube. But it was just to see if anybody was doing. I was hoping for somebody to react to find some companions on on these kind of things. And and then a lot of people reacted, and the community grew up. So then it became a thing that at the beginning was just a strange hypothesis.
Yeah, Austin, let's go in reverse. So Austin, yeah, you mentioned you discovered the book, and but like around you, what's that? I mean, how does that factor into someone's life? Like this concept, it's kind of strange. I mean, like you're used to performing repertoire, difficult repertoire. It's a really different way of thinking. So how does that even enter into your environment, and what's that reaction like?
Yeah, so I discovered it when I was still doing my undergrad. So I was aware of all this topic, but it wasn't until a couple of years later when I started my master's that I actually was really able to dive into it. I was pretty focused on repertoire at that time, so it was in the back of my mind, and I always knew it was like, this is something I gotta get to. I gotta get to this. But it wasn't until I had a little bit more time. So one of the things that drove it for me was I wanted to understand how the music worked. So it's one of the big advantages, I think, even if you're not you don't gain facility in being able to improvise necessarily, but if you understand how basically the music works, it helps you kind of realize what's going on. So even if we're not talking about improvisers or people who are wanting to become specialists in that, even just for someone who performs repertoire, for even things like memory, people talk about chunking and whatnot. Well, if I can remember this whole part is a fonte, and I have this segment where for these whole bars, I know that's a fonte. So it's just a variation on this basic pattern I'm already aware of. Well, it's so much easier to remember just where the slight deviations are and whatnot. And then how the music fits together, and then also the part of the language. So also just the curiosity where like I don't want to be dedicating my life to music without this genre without having some sort of familiarity with how it works. It's kind of be like studying a language I don't know how to speak at all.
Yeah, it's like memorizing. If you don't speak French, it's like just memorizing. I don't know, just you name it, a French book, and then not knowing what the book's about. It's crazy.
You're thinking at like an arm's length or something. It makes it feel colder. But whereas if you kind of get a little sense of the understanding, it feels a lot more relatable. Like I kind of the way I approached it was not so much straight basso continuo, but I approached it a lot by looking at what the 19th century guitarists did. So when I first started doing it, like Nicola, but much later, I don't have 12 years under my belt, was looking at things like Fenaroli, or I did I was playing some J.S. Bach and Handel, continuo with a violinist, and I kept finding I don't know where to put these chords. It feels clunky, and the voice leading on the guitar because it got really. Because I was thinking 4 voices moving, and it's doable and it can sound good, but I was having a hard time being like, this doesn't feel natural. This doesn't feel like the way to do it. So that's kind of why I took the approach of looking at the 19th century guitarists, because you mentioned they just penned a lot of this stuff really quickly? Did they have training in this? I haven't been able to find a lot of details about actually what specifically they learned, but I have a hard time imagining they didn't study these things based on when they grew up and where they grew up. And when you look at the music, it's really clear that they knew, especially people like Giuliani, Sohr, Carulli, they knew all this stuff. So when you look at the music, like how do I set these patterns? How do I set how would they voice these things? Well, in the 19th century, they have all that stuff right there for you. Just got to look at the music, and they basically solve the problems for you. Like, oh, this is how you do it. Oh, this is how you do it. You know, there's variations. It's not like it's a little different because it is a little later, and the style's much more. You know, think Rossini. So it's not a direct comparison to maybe something in 1750, but at least but the musical language is continuous. So a lot of this, it's not like there was a big abrupt, like Schoenberg showed up and everything's different now. So, so you can learn a lot from it, and the way they do things makes it a lot easier. It feels natural. It doesn't feel like you're doing this kind of contrived thing on the instrument.
Right. And Brandon, I want to bring you in here. You're a very experienced continuo player. And what do you make of all of this Partimento business? When did you discover it? And how does that inform like how you're looking at things? And how do you react to all of this new information?
Well, yeah. So I have to say, thanks to your podcast and your show here, and especially the episodes you did with Nicola, this has been the thing that's sort of sent me down the rabbit hole recently of going Partimento on the guitar. This is something I really want to do, and so of course I instantly got Nicola's new publication of the Fenaroli book, and now I'm living in this. But like you said, the ideas themselves aren't new. I mean, for 10 years I've been playing continuo professionally. Tonight I'm playing a program of mostly Vivaldi, and in a way it's a lot of the same thing. Like you were saying, is under the umbrella of basso continuo, because I mean you learn these same things from reading Acker and all the treatises. You learn the movement of the bass influences what happens above, right? And if you have a rising bass step by step, you can do 5/6 5/6, and if it falls, you can do 7/6 7/6. And so it's, if the bass does this, you can do this, you know. And that's kind of what Partimento is doing. But my amazing discovery through kind of now thinking about Partimento is that it's not just about playing a nice chord with a nice fill. You can have fully fleshed out melodic content given the bass line, and that's the new realization that it really has got me super excited, especially as Austin and Nicola have been doing when applied to understanding early 19th century guitar, and just seeing what composers are doing, going, they're using these beautiful patterns that are and recycling them, you know, not inventing from scratch. So for me, as mostly a continuo player nowadays, I find it so exciting because it seems like the next level. And so I wouldn't call myself a Partimento player yet, because I'm just scratching the surface. But yeah, I find it super inspiring, and I see no reason why guitarists shouldn't be doing this. Why also classical guitarists shouldn't have a basic understanding of basso continuo. All of this will improve their playing, their understanding of the fretboard. It should be something, I think, essential in all university programs, in my opinion. But yeah, so basically I'm at the point now where I'm just super excited about it and looking forward to seeing what comes next.
Yeah, you talked about this is great, because let's talk about ensemble playing. So I want the panel to react to this quote. This is, of course, the great John Williams, really one of the most famous guitarists of the 20th century. But I went to his Wikipedia page, and prominently he's talking about music education. Here's the quote: "Students are preoccupied with fingerings and not notes, much less sounds. Some are able to play difficult solo works from memory, but have a very poor sense of ensemble playing or timing. And I can say I never played in an ensemble. The idea of continual playing, I mean, it's quite foreign to where I am. As I mentioned before, it's mainly recitals and mainly competitions. It's actually it would have been kind of cool to play in an ensemble with a violinist or a cellist, or just to get a different dimension. Do you feel that's the case in classical guitar education? Are we just there's maybe too much solo playing, and maybe we could benefit from playing with other musicians in different settings? Would that be very beneficial for our overall education? So maybe Brandon, why don't we start with you first on this topic?
Yeah, I was just having this conversation yesterday with my friend who's a lute player. This, I think, for me, I would call this a crisis in the classical guitar world. I can speak only really about the U.S., but the fact that guitarists are in a bubble in their university, and the only ensemble experience most of them will get is guitar ensemble, which frankly
Other
is not
guitarists.
it's not a good ensemble experience. And part of the issue is that classical guitarists, like all of us, I mean, tend to discover it late in the game. We're actually rock or blues players, and it comes time to go to college, and we kind of play catch up. Where all the pianists and the orchestra players have been doing it since they were 6, and so then the level of music making isn't very high. And then if there's such a disparity among the players that the ensemble experience isn't great. Where if you go play with a singer, you play with a violinist, suddenly you're going to have to catch up to their level, and they're going to start using vocabulary, and they'll breathe in a certain way and give you body cues, and you'll have to learn how to follow their breath and speak the language, the lingo, to understand how to work in a rehearsal, and that makes you more musical. When you're stuck in the bubble and you only play this game of telephone with other guitarists, you get kind of trapped in this world. So I would encourage guitarists to, don't stay on your instrument. Don't only play with guitarists. In university programs, I think we have to expand to outside. I mean, personally, I just sought it out. I found singers. I found other ensembles. I volunteered to play in the Baroque opera and figured bass and things. And I think that's what you should be going for. And for me, that's absolutely essential. If you can only play as a soloist, you're not finding all the beauty in music, but also you're not getting those core musicianship skills that you need as an artist that will push you higher and higher as you realize, oh, I see, I can learn a lot from how to sculpt a bass line from playing with a cellist. And oh my, wow, the what the singer does with the text here is so beautiful. Maybe I can imitate that, or listen to how the singer's doing vibrato. Like, I can imitate that rather than trying to learn vibrato by imitating Pepe Romero. No guitarist should imitate another guitarist's vibrato, in my opinion. We should listen to singers. We shouldn't imitate the sustain or the from guitarists. All the content that we could be using to infer a musical interpretation can come from the outside and not just in our own world. So yeah, I could go on, but you can see that I'm enthusiastic about this. I think it's absolutely I'll keep going. It's absolutely essential. It's the most important part is I'm not being elitist. I'm not trying to talk down to anybody. It's beautiful. It's fun. There's so much good music waiting for you. Enjoy it, and only good things will come from that type of experience.
Isn't it crazy that the guitar it's really like, if you think about it, it's meant to accompany people. It's really like, it's got strings. You're meant to bang it out. I mean, at its most primal form. And yet when we learn classical guitar, we barely do that. We remove ourselves from that and we play beautiful things. But I absolutely agree with what you just said, Brandon. Now, Austin, you mentioned accompanying somebody. Tell me about ensemble playing. I mean, I'd love to get your opinion on that.
You mentioned the guitar is meant to accompany people. I should maybe mention that if you read back any biographies of someone like Giuliani, the amount of time he spends in group ensembles is incredible. A lot of what he did was accompanying with other people. They had all sorts of groups that they were constantly playing with, such as Maysader. So a lot of there's so much chamber works by Giuliani. And a lot of that comes from because he was playing with people all the time. So like Maysayer and various other names, Hummel, Moscheles. I don't know if I'm saying that right. If anyone, Ignaz. But So kind of Brandon covered a lot of it, and I think some of it's, I don't know if this is applicable everywhere, but sometimes people get into the classical guitar late, especially if they're going to university for it. So there's a little bit of catch up. So sometimes the focus is on getting the level up higher, whereas if you have a little bit more facility with the instrument, you're already doing ensembles, you're already doing all that stuff because you've had enough of that background. So sometimes guitarists are left doing catch up, and that's maybe partly why they're isolated. So yeah, but playing with instruments, it's one of those things when you're by yourself. The guitar has a lot of technical difficulties. So something as simple as shifting, so playing something legato, if you have to shift, that means your shifting technique has to be bang on, or else you'll have a break in the sound. So often I found this with myself, and I've seen this before, is when you're practicing, if you have something difficult, whereas there's a shift, a lot of times you break the continuity of the line. So it's hard to maintain a full musical phrase because the technical difficulties are getting in the way. So you're focused on breaking up all these different components, which when you're talking about the John Williams quote, they're focused on fingering. So especially if you don't have a familiar with what's going on in the music, one, you're already memorizing the notes, just trying to memorize bass patterns, then add in shifting and legato, all sorts of these other elements. So by the time you get to thinking about phrasing, you already have so many other things ahead of you that it becomes difficult to make that next step. So, but the important part about playing ensemble is that it makes you take that next step. Because if you're playing with someone else, and you're playing as a group, it doesn't matter if you got this crazy shit going on here. You got to make it work, and you have to make it sound cohesive. So that's that's one of the really valuable things. There's lots, but it gets you out of this, oh man, the guitar, this bubble, like, I gotta, you're kind of wallowing in the difficulties of the instrument, and kind of gets you out in the world. Well, just do it. You got to figure it out, and often it pushes you to that next level, and just kind of gets you, just kind of makes you do it, kind of by trial by fire. So that's one of the important things.
Yeah, Nicola, what do you think? I mean, you're also a very experienced accompanist in early music. Does the classical guitar in general, do students not get enough ensemble playing?
Yes, and I always say to my students that there are things they can learn into the lesson, and things that you can learn only in ensemble playing, and there are things you can learn only when you go to the stage to perform. So it's important to know that you cannot learn everything a musician needs to know into the guitar lesson. And I have this kind of idea, but it's just my opinion, that the guitar was born to accompany other musicians, other dancers and singers, as we see in many guitar traditions. But as a very popular instrument, and I mean popular like folk instrument, for a long time, at the beginning of, let's say, beginning of the 20th century, some great guitarists like Segovia, like Miguel Llobet, they tried to bring the guitar out of this, let's say, circle of popular music, and to make the guitar an aristocratic instrument to be played solo in a theater. And to me, at this point, it was like, if I have to perform guitar, better to perform solo, so I can show I'm a real musician, like the pianist, like the violinist. And I can understand that, because at that time the guitar was not even in the conservatorium. In fact, when we see the life of Giuliani, Carulli, and many other guitarists also came after, they didn't study guitar in the school. They always studied in private lesson, because it was not an instrument so important to be into the school. And there was a long time, even in Italy, the first guitar class in conservatory was in Rome. It was like in the 1930, 1940. So it was in that moment they needed to do this. But now we are paying this choice of focusing more on solo guitar, and it's a problem because, as already Brandon Austin said, it's super important to play in ensemble because you learn a lot of things that you cannot learn solo, and you can enjoy so much beautiful music that you will miss if you're not doing it. So totally, totally fine with the other colleagues. It's super important.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Segovia. Wait, let's. What is that? Works for
Berlin flute
pull out a little
cello.
bit, Austin. Can you
Oh, back?
zoom? Yeah, is back a little bit. Which is it?
Shoot, sorry. This is so inverted. Oh my god.
I can mirror your screen. No, it's
The
showing
works
the
for
right.
violin, flute, violoncello, and guitar.
Is that Giuliani or is that Soar?
Giuliani. But there's
Okay.
volumes and volumes and volumes of this stuff. And this is just one. It's like $1,000 for them all. But works for piano, guitar. So if anyone's like, "Wow, I don't know what to play. I don't know which ensemble works." There's so much. Go on IMSLP and try to find it. There's buckets load of really great stuff. So.
Segovia was brought up, and very important figure, very huge figure in classical guitar. I mean, a heroic figure in many ways because, as you mentioned, Nicola, he elevated the guitar to a concert stage into a level of respectability that a lot of people are benefiting from today, and really pioneering work. And yet also there's not everyone there's also disagreements with some of the. He's a very opinionated man, so he had very strong opinions, and we don't always agree with every single thing that he said. I have to bring this topic up, and Brandon, you have to. This was a big one on your channel. I mean, that you got a lot of views on, which is nails. The concept of playing the guitar with nails. So, I mean, I was shocked to learn that what was it? Giuliani didn't play with nails. Is that right? He played with his fingers. Soar, is it right? Played with his fingertips as well. So what? I mean, that's heresy, right? Surely that's heresy. I mean, I always thought you had to play with nails for the classical guitar. So let's talk about that topic then. And obviously it's not related to basso continuo, but I think it's such a big an important topic that everyone who enters classical guitar has to approach and deal with. So do we play the classical guitar with nails or not?
Right. First of all, it is related to basso continuo also. I can get back to that. So this is an unfortunate topic in the classical guitar world. I think it's kind of a sad thing that has happened. So I would love to, take a moment to shed some light on this. But I did do a elaborate video on my channel if you'd like to check that out. Also, Rob McKillop on YouTube has a bunch of videos on the topic and a great website. In short, there's no ambiguity. For hundreds and hundreds of years, guitars and lutes have been played with and without nails. We know this. Piccinini talks about it for theorbo and arch lute. So for basso continuo playing, he talks about using nails. Other people talked about preferring the sound of the flesh. And then, of course, in the 19th century, people like Soar, Carcassi, so there's also Targa and his whole school with Pujol. There are certain people who preferred the sound of and the delicacy of playing, the intimacy of playing with the flesh, and there are certain people who found you can get things a nicer sound with nails. In the end, both are historical, both are valid. It's taste. But unfortunately, the current state, perhaps because of Segovia's influence
he
and the
said,
dogma that's around that.
Wasn't there a quote that he said that people who don't use nails are idiots? I mean, I don't know if that's the exact quote, but let's just say it's a strong opinion.
If there's something like, to be a serious guitarist, you have to play with nails. And unfortunately, if you go to almost any music conservatory with any mainstream professional guitarist, they will echo this. But I assure you that unfortunately, this thing that's often said is repeated and repeated, but it comes from a place of ignorance. The people who say this have never actually tried it. The only time they've tried it, they broke a nail and played for 3 seconds with the same technique and declare it doesn't work. But come on, did you grow your nail and in the first 3 seconds understand how to shape it and play perfect tone? No, it takes just as long to play with a good tone with flesh as it did with nails. So it took me 6 months before I could make a sound that I enjoyed I go back and forth now. For the past 3 years, I've gone with nails, without. I went no thumbnail for 2 years and nails on the fingers. Right now, I have nails on on all the fingers, but I go back and forth. I've discovered I can play as fast, I can play as loud. It's a different timbre, it's different touch, different tone color, but both have something beautiful to offer and should not be written off as, especially out of ignorance, without having actually tried it or explored it.
Right.
So, as you can see, I could go on here, but for sure we need to stop. We need to move on from this myth that you need nails, and historically, it's very evident that both are valid.
Yeah, Austin, what's your opinion on that? I mean, what do you think of the nail issue?
Right, I saw Brandon's video on that. It actually changed my mind a little bit, because I was definitely in the nail camp. But I guess I didn't really think about it. I don't really have strong feelings about it either way. I haven't seen enough people do it without nails to really have much of an opinion on it. I know you definitely get different timbres. So with Brandon says he can play as loud without nails. I'm gonna have to take his word for that because I don't have enough experience. Because how many guitarists do you see with playing without nails? It's almost zero. So it's hard to say. So and I think the point with because we practice so much to get that tone with a nail that I'd imagine without nails it's quite similar because you can't just do the same attack if you have a different contact point with the finger. So something I'd have to learn more about. You definitely get a different tone though. With nails, it's a rounder, more forward sound, and it seems without nails it's much more subdued, a little bit more of a personal sound. Not too sure. I don't have much of an opinion about it.
So. No, that's fine. And what do you think, Nicole, about the nail issue?
That was a big topic for me and for my life because I started playing with the gut strings on the classical guitar since almost 10 years. And with my friend Daniele, with Duo Scarlatti. And let's say the first contact with gut strings was just that the strings were breaking a lot, especially the first and second. And I was spending all my money. It was an era I was really poor because of gut strings. And then I started, shaving till I had no nails. And but let's say that's for fun. In the same time, I was making research about how was the life before nylon. And something that I discovered was I was amazed that the nylon was discovered like in the 30s. So every guitar player before that, before the Second World War, was playing on gut strings. So even Paco de Lucia, even Sabika, so even people with strong necks and such a strong picado. And also investigating on the history of the guitar, I found that in the Method of Sor, he says something that I never heard a guitarist with nails having a good tone on the guitar, except for my friend Dioniso Aguado. So we know that in that time, still there were Sor playing with no nails and Aguado playing with nails. And they were even friends and they played together. We know the piece for two guitar, Les Amis, the suite Les Amis for two guitars written by Sor for him and Aguado playing together. And we also know that Francesco Corbetta, that was the most popular, the greatest guitarist of the Baroque era, he cancelled a concert because he broke a nail. So he didn't want to play without. So I'm okay with the opinion of Brandon. We both are historical to play with nails and no nails, and it's just a matter of taste. Of course, it takes a lot of time. It took me, I think, almost 1 year to get, to the weight of the hand and how to touch the string, how to cavata. I don't know how to pull the strings. And for some years, I played with no nails in concert, but without telling the audience, just to see if they could tell me, you were playing. No, And I found that no one was aware of this. So at the end of the concert, I was saying, "Okay, now I have to tell you, I played with no nails." And people, "Oh, really? I don't know." But I also remember some friends when they saw me the first time with no nails after many years. Some thought I was like crazy. Some thought I left the guitar forever. So yeah, it was something. Colleagues look at my right hand and they thought, "Oh, okay, yeah, he got the loot. He's got crazy. No guitarist anymore." But that's
Yeah.
totally wrong. And it's difficult because it's very difficult for a lot of people who was trained like this with guitar equals nails. But yeah, it's not like this. You can play whatever. It just taste.
Can I add one last thing?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you want to go, Brendan? Or I just got a quick thing. So
Yeah,
it's,
absolutely.
Please, Austin.
when we're talking about taste, it's really, I think what it comes down to is, can you make a good tone? Can you make a tone that people like? Can you make something that that people will appreciate? So it's not even necessarily a question of being historically valid, because of course it is. So then really what it comes down to is, do people like what they hear? So Nicola plays concerts, people love his tone. I can tell lots of people love Brandon's tone. So do it. Sounds great. People like it.
Yeah.
People like nails. Do both. Yeah.
Exactly. So the questions of taste have to be recognized as just that. I just wanted to add two little anecdotes that I think help this conversation. One, at the moment tonight, I'm playing a concert with a theorbo player. We're playing next to each other, both on baroque guitar and then on theorbo and arch flute. We're the same volume, and there's many moments where he's louder than me, and I'm playing with nails, and he's not. So there's the test. Also, Soar and Aguado played together. There's other duets I've done with them without nails. I was as loud without. The difference is in the timbre. The brightness cuts and is perceived as volume, but the decibels, I'm absolutely convinced, is that you can make it as loud as sound. I think it's easier with nails to just move the string more, but so you can play in duet, and you can probably not recognize the nail player, I think. The other thing I wanted to point out is one of the other things you're often told. You hear things a lot like tremolo, the technique of playing very fast with PAMI, thumb, ring, middle, index, is impossible without nails. This has been said for decades, and I've heard this again and again. So I purposely made a video where I played Recuerdos de la Alhambra, the most famous tremolo piece, without nails on gut strings, just to show that it could be done, because I was told again and again and again it's impossible. But here, one funny thing about this is, what moves the string? Is it the nail? Do our shoes move us to run, or do our legs move us to run? What's propelling us forward? It comes from the fingers. So what's happening at the tip doesn't correlate to speed. It just changes the ending timbre. It's a hard surface versus a soft surface that's engaging the string. So anyway, big topic. I just wanted to recommend that. So that's my nail performance, and then I also have a no nail performance.
Oh, I have to find
it. The two.
Oh, that's the nail one. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so boy, the time really flew, and we have a bunch of audience questions, and but I there's a couple, just two more I would just want to ask the panel. No, these are direct questions. So first, I want to ask Austin. You had a really nice presentation. I really loved watching it. It was was it like a master's presentation where you talked about?
Yeah, I did like the defense, and it was like instead of a final recital, you had to do like some sort of performance presentation. So I basically played the material in my thesis.
Yeah. So like, what is that like? How did your professors? Because this is new stuff. Let's be honest. This is pretty new. We think that this is, well, everyone knows what this is, but really it's very new. Yeah. So like, what's the reaction like? And like, was anyone curious about like the information you were presenting?
Yeah, I had a hard time finding people that would knew much about it as far as like in detail. So a lot of it I kind of had to do on my own, and then my professors were like, that looks good, let's move it here, and kind of focusing down the ideas, but rather so much than providing details on the background on some of the stuff. One of my advisors I did a basso continuo study with. She's a pianist, a wonderful pianist named Dr. Deanna Oy. And so that was who I played the handle with and whatnot. So she helped me with some of the, especially if the rhythmic aspects of that. So hey, make sure. So actually, how to play that in an ensemble, not just like because the actual how to play it on the instrument. She was like, I don't know, you're gonna have to figure that out. Like this is how to,
Story of the guitarist's life.
hear the basics, like the fundamentals of it. She helped me with, and so yeah. So the presentation itself, it was there's a little bit of confusion. Well, a lot of people are really interested in it, but also some a little bit. What's the utility of it? Is it mostly supportive, but also a little bit of I don't know.
What am I going to do with this? That's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting. I remember I asked I asked. Yes, and definitely people are very interested in this. I mean, if we wouldn't be having this panel if there was no interest in this. And now, Nicole, I wanted to ask you. You have Brandon mentioned your book. What do you think? What's the reaction been like? And you published it, and I was really thrilled to see it published. And we have a book finally for guitar, Partimento for guitar. So how's the reaction been going to it?
Yeah, the reaction is very good, and I had a lot of enthusiasm of people writing me thanks for this book, and it's fun to use Amazon as a publisher because you can see exactly where people are located when they buy the book, and so every time I present the book, a lot of people is buying. So I think people is very enthusiastic about this, and I found there is a lot of guitarists who wanted to start to study Partimento, to practice, but they didn't know where to start. So I decided to do this version of Fenaroli. I didn't write; I just transcribed the examples for the guitar. But at least it's a starting point for a guitarist. It was something I needed to have for me, and it was like 3 years on my computer. And at some point, I said, "Okay, let's publish this because there's no point of being there in the closet." And so I'm really happy for the enthusiasm of the, let's say, guitar community. It's true that a lot of people still doesn't know what it is. What is it for? What I'm doing with this, but I'm sure with the time and with the growing of the guitar community, everybody will figure out what to do with these things and start doing their own music, their own improvisation, and to enrich the music that we already have.
Yeah, absolutely, great, and congratulations for the book. It really is fantastic. And now we just have a little bit of time, and we have some audience questions. People are intrigued about this, and people send in some questions. So this is just for anyone in the panel, and please jump in. We'll start with maybe the first question, and this is not just Partimento, but also Basso Continuo, and just guitar, classical guitar in general. We have 3 wonderful experts here. So let's start with the first question. In case you are the only continuo player, how important is keeping the original bass line? So who wants to take that? This is a good continuo question. Because I know, Nicola, in Partimento, sometimes you have to change Fenaroli's bass line. In continuo, is that similar? Who wants to talk about
Nicola,
that?
Go ahead.
Okay. You go, Brandon.
Yeah, you two are the continuo.
You can take it.
Okay, so it depends how is the continuo part written, because when you read Partimento, it's often like a keyboard line, and you can find things like pom 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 pom, this kind of things, this kind of diminution. And when you realize it alone on the guitar, maybe it sounds better. I think Austin made a really nice example in one of his videos, one of his realizations, where he brought this kind of diminution in the upper part that sounds better on the guitar. While in my experience as a continuo playing in ensemble and orchestra, often the parts are more vocal, let's say, more like for let's say less keyboard parts. And I found very useful to keep the original line if I am the only continuo player. Of course, depend on which instrument I am realizing the part. Because the tiorbo, as a continuo, I play the tiorbo and the bar guitar. Unfortunately, not the archflute. And these instruments works very different one from another. For the tiorbo is perfect with the bass, it sounds amazing. While the bar guitar not, because it has no bass. It looks like a kind of ukulele because it has a high string on the fourth, so, and you have no bass on the fifth, and there is no sixth string. So when I'm with the turbo, I try to keep the original line if I am the only bass player. If I'm using the bar guitar for a rhythmic reason of color is a choice of the director, no, I make everything for guitar.
Great. Yeah, Brandon, did you want to jump in on this question?
I agree with Nicola. I think also it's important to know some things like we have tablature of theorbo realizing the bass, and you learn that a very normal thing to do on that instrument is take the bass line down the octave. So to use the long diapasons, for example. So often I'm playing an octave below what everyone else is doing, the written line. So so there's quite a lot happening off the page, and basically in the end, I think what you do is what sounds well. And on the theorbo, at a certain point, you can't go higher. So you can either only play the bass line, or you have to take it down the octave to realize chords. So often you're transposing down the octave just to make it work. And if I was playing continuo on the classical guitar, I would probably do the same thing freely, is go down the octave to make more full realizations. You also have to be aware of what's happening in the vocal line. You don't necessarily want to play super high above the singer. So if you're aware of that, then that might change where you play the line. So I think there's some freedom in where you play the bass.
With the classical guitar, you have to, like, for example, like if you look at, say we're playing on one of the top strings, and we have to move up or something. Often we have to jump registers where you'll get something like an open, and then so the register might jump in between octaves like that, or a top line even. So normally you could expect it to go, but you can already hear there, I have a chord, but once I get in here, I have to go down to two voices. So maybe sometimes you'd want that, but at other times if you wanted to fill in a chord, especially if we're thinking of classical style, which often has to do with rhetoric.
Rhetoric,
so
that's it. I love that word.
Big, a declamation, So you'd want, so there, the top voice, move up there. So I don't know what it would be like for continuo, and with the lute, but on the classical guitar, at least with solo works, and then also with ensemble works, it can be pretty free. However, it has to make sense. So you can't just do it whenever, but you kind of learn as you do it what's tasteful, what can you get away with, and just you kind of have to just practice it a bunch and see what's awkward and see what sounds normal. And sometimes if you just kind of do it convincingly, it sounds normal and people go, oh yeah, so the guitar can be kind of forgiving in that way. Is it strict like an organ? No, but it's one of the compromises you just on the classical guitar you have to make sometimes.
And Austin, you win the prize for saying the magic word rhetoric. I think that word needs to be said a lot more, especially when it comes to performance. I love that word. Thank you, John, for the question. And somebody mentioned the ukulele. It was you, Nicola. This is a question. Any tips for practicing the rule of the octave on the ukulele? Now, I mean, come on. That's so cool, right? And merci beaucoup. Brandon has helped me tremendously. He's so excited for this panel. So the ukulele, I mean, come on. I mean, the ukulele and early music. I mean, why not, right? So is it possible to do the rule of the octave on the ukulele?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's same as Baroque guitar. It's a Renaissance guitar, basically. The ukulele is where the ukulele comes from. Is the Renaissance guitar, 4-course guitar. You wouldn't be thinking in inversions with super nice voice leading in the same way. You think block chords. It's like campfire chords. It works. You can do it. It's just don't expect any magical don't expect to hear a beautiful bass line. It's good. It'd be like chunky chords, like on the Baroque guitar. But you can do it because you're playing the right harmony, right? You're playing the right chords with the right notes in it. But you'd be strumming. You can do passing notes as well. I mean, you can do beautiful things on the ukulele. Look at the
Absolutely.
Renaissance guitar repertoire. It's actually very beautiful. They're not very big. I've never tried to play the rule of the octave on the ukulele. I don't know, Nicola. Have you? What do you think?
No, me neither, but I played the chitarrino, and I think it's pretty much the same. And as long as you, of course, as you said, you don't think to have all the lines correct, but you think like the alfabeto of the Baroque guitar. When you play the letters of the alfabeto, yeah, you play all the right harmonies, but the voice leading is something you are not thinking about when you do the alfabeto. So I think that this can be the solution for the ukulele.
Are you guys like looking at my slides? Because you just mentioned the next keyword for the next question, because alphabeto is the next questions. So it's just, what's going on here? By the way, thank you so much, Lawrence, for the question. Yeah. So alphabeto, that just, you guys are psychic or something. So something about alphabeto system for continual playing would be amazing. So panel, please, what do you think? Alphabeto, I mean, I was shocked, Nicola, when you told me it existed in the first place. I mean, what is this? This is so cool. So what are you want to mention anything about alphabeto that perhaps could be useful for thinking in terms of continual partimento? Nicola, why don't you start first, because you're the one who introduced me to it.
Yeah, sure. The alphabeto, I think, is super useful. Of course, when let's say, is an important notation for the Baroque guitar, and it tells you a lot about the music, about how they will think the music. For me, it was incredible to learn the article by Christensen saying that the use of the alphabeto brought to the fundamental bassline theory, especially because they decided to, okay, let's not think about all the voices, but let's think about what is this chord, what is this shape of the hand. So it's like the first, for me, it was the first experience with basso continuo to learn letters of the alphabeto. I think it's super cool to learn also the alphabeto falso. There are also letters with dissonances that are very cool. And there is a lot of Baroque guitar tutorials, mainly on every publication for Baroque guitar. In the beginning, after the front page, there was an alphabeto chart. And I think it's very useful to look at the alphabeto when you have both the notations, the alphabeto and basso continuo. So you can learn how can you realize on the guitar what you see as a bass line of basso continuo. I think it's super useful, this one.
Now, Brandon, I see the instrument is out. I'm getting very excited.
Yes, so I mean, so today, like in my Vivaldi concert, there's lots of moments where you see this, and it's super helpful to know. Yeah, exactly like Nicola was saying, like when the bass line is doing something super active. I actually have a low A on this one right now, but we're tempted at the beginning to think, oh my god, like play all these chords, and you just get a kind of a sad realization that's not really working. And then what you realize is, if you look at the historical, it's basically lead sheets, like in jazz. Like you just play D minor over that whole spot, and then the next one you just play A major, and then you can just focus on what the guitar does well. So all the bossy pum 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 pum, you can play and just strum chords and give like a tambourine a rhythm, and the combination of pum 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 is awesome, and then you really feel like you're playing with the ensemble, but you're just doing lead sheet stuff. And at the beginning of my continual playing as well, I was writing in D minor, playing Baroque guitar, G minor, A, and I felt so guilty. Yeah, I felt so guilty. I said, "Oh, I'm cheating." And then when I discovered the realizations with alphabeto, I said, "It's the same thing." So okay, this is actually historical, and it makes perfect sense. So you have to, as a continual player, a lot of what you're doing, it's looking at a full score or a part, and then inventing something that's completely off the page, especially on the Baroque guitar. I mean, I'm often listening to the violins, and I'm adding percussive hits and rhythmic strums and grooves that aren't written anywhere in the music, but it's something that it seems they would have done. So when it comes to a strummy instrument like this and using alphabeto, that's the game you're playing. It's really like a lead sheet.
Thank you, by the way, Geronimo. Thank you so much for the question, and we just have 2 more questions. So, Yop Music, on guitar, I find 4-part continual performances very difficult if I want to avoid parallel perfect consonances. Should 3-part be the default? And if not, how important is it to avoid parallelism in 4-part realizations?
Is this for the classical guitar, more specifically? This question rather than something like the Baroque guitar?
Looks like it could be pretty general, yeah.
Yeah, I think 3-part. Well, you have to move between the voices. Maybe this isn't so much for continua, but for writing or for Partimenti. 2 to 3 voices with, again, I'm going to use that word for rhetoric reasons. Any big moments that you need, you can expand it out. So it's pretty flexible. You have to do it in a way that makes sense, that sounds organic. But often you drop between multiple voices. So they're worrying about perfect parallel consonant, or parallel perfect consonances. Avoid. Oh yeah, for fifths and octaves. Yeah, there's so many different. You end up with, like, just to even do something like there's so many different voices you have to deal with. So, and often what you'll see. So, for example, which way do I want to go? Okay, I do want to go this way. So say we're in B minor, or we're moving to something in B minor, and I want to go. So if we're thinking B minor or scale degree 1, going to scale degree 7, like, look at that shape, and it only works nice because I have an open E string. So often what happens is you run into challenges where the fingerings become really specific if you're doing 4 voices, and a move between them gets really clunky. So like in the 19th century, when we have that sort of move, they almost always do the diminished version rather than 6/5 chord. So that instead of going 4, they'll go, and then here at the end it is 6 full big strum. So if you're constantly worrying about
that 6/5 looks awful. Oh, that 6. That looks. I mean, that looks tough. Oh my goodness! Oh no!
So don't worry about it too much. Versus, I was just doing 3 voices there. Now with 3 voices, I can even do that, or I can, there's multiple different ways. Wherever if I'm trying to do 4 voices, I have to do that all of a sudden.
Oof.
Yeah, right. So don't get too caught up in that. And if you have something that moves, so often, like, if they have something like that, you get the illusion of more than 1 voices by breaking it up into diminutions. So that whole time, I'm only ever playing 1 note at a time, which lets me move. Same as if you're doing. See that stretch for the 9th? I can't do that at the same time. So then you can release. So so you have to be flexible, and often that's where, if you're trying to do things just in block chords all the time with no sense of no diminutions or anything, it gets harder on the guitar because often they place rhythmic breaks so that bass note might come in on the second 16th note. Because and when you're in a moving texture, that's, especially if it's continuous, where there's no breaks in the rhythm, it's just solid 16th notes, so they blend in together. Whereas if you're just trying to play everything in blocks, now you're having to do with all 4 fingers down at the exact same time, and it can get. And then so if you're wearing on top of that, forget it.
Yeah. Anybody else wanted to jump in on that question about the multiple parts to a realization?
I would really personally say give up instantly on this, like, keyboard idea of constant 4 voice texture. Just if you're a guitarist, a theorbo player, arch lead, even, like, abandon that and go down to 2 voices as like a constant, and then 3 voices when it's easy, and 4 voices if it really makes sense. It's about what's being idiomatic. You need to stay idiomatic to the instrument, which is when you can be musical, right? If you're fighting for your life to just play the right notes, which is what you see a lot with arrangements of like keyboard music is some people do it. They have this amazing technique where they can do it, but then you don't really get a lot of music making happening because they're doing the bare minimum, which is the right notes at the right time. But so instead, what's much more musical is focusing on something simple. So if you have like a passacaglia, just doing two voices is beautiful, and if you can fit in whatever three voices, it works. And actually what you find is sometimes you hit extra notes which are convenient, and maybe suddenly you have four voices occasionally. I find, at least in my continual playing, that's what seems to work the best. And as a default, I think I'm playing the bass with a third or a tenth or a sixth, and then when convenient, I fill it out. But if you start from that approach, I find you'll be happy. The realizations from the historical realizations seem to back that up a bit, and then the four voice thing seems to be more of a keyboard idea.
Nicola, Austin, go ahead.
If you we could Nicola can go, but if you pull up the Giuliani Opus 15, the first movement.
Let me try and pull it up. Yeah.
Yeah, while Nicola's talking, maybe then you can see this principle that Brandon was talking about, like right in action.
What's the name of the piece again? The Opus what?
Opus 15 by Giuliani.
Okay. Yeah, Nicola, why don't you jump in and then I'll search for that.
Yeah, I would say the basic realization is two voices, and also the keyboard realization. The few sources we have of realization of students of Fenaroli are for keyboard in two voices, and yet in the rules, the examples, the keyboard examples, they go from 3 to 4 voices, and voices appear and disappear. If you think is mostly all of us have played some Scarlatti Sonata or Cimarosa, and they are for keyboard. They are mostly all two voices, sometimes three. So the four voice setting was something more of the Bach chorale tradition. But let's say the real music we play on the guitar is mostly all two voices and two and three voices, and of course has to be idiomatic. But I put Brandon just take off this idea of four voices realization on the guitar. It just doesn't make sense. There are some examples, yes, but the 90% of the music for the guitar is 2-3 voices.
90, wow. Austin, so was it the Opus 15 by Giuliani?
Yeah. So like, if you look at the beginning there, there's only ever one voice in the opening. So it's an implied three voice, or you can think of like a violin, with the legato bowing. But two voices in the very beginning, because it's moving, it's lyrical. So that's again what I was talking about, the illusion of three voices. So often you're only playing two voices, but you get the illusion of three. So the illusion there is three, but only you're ever striking two in the beginning, because it's quite a fast melody. And so if you're playing with articulation, which you need, and everything, you need. It has to be two, and so you only see two voices all the way until the cadence at the end there. Boom, bom, bom, bom. That's the only, and then later for really big moments, it goes up to 5 or whatever. But those are just strums, so that's fairly constant through the whole thing. If you have parallel thirds, it's fine to add in 3 voices, but the general rule is 2.
Incredible. You said something really great there, Austin, about illusions, and I think that's what the clever guitar composers really do so well in classical guitar compositions. Especially the transcriptions by Targa, you see what they often do is they start a piece with the kind of like what the orchestra would do before the soprano would start singing. You get the full fleshed out, accompaniment, and then the second the melody starts, you actually abandon all those intricate lines, and you just play a bass with a top line. But in your mind, you have that implanted, and that carries on. Those voices that you're actually not even playing, but you have the impression that they continue. And really good guitar composers do that. They plant an idea in your mind, and then they almost convince you that it's still there. And the second soprano stops, maybe they'll do something more interesting below. But it would be the bad guitar composer who tries to do all of it at once. because then everything suffers and nothing is actually beautiful anymore. So that's the art of the guitar, is downsizing but keeping the essence of the beauty.
Wonderful. Now
Don't
we
lose
just
the
go
forest
ahead,
for the
Chris.
trees.
Yeah.
That phrase.
Thank you so much to the panel for just staying on a little bit. I mean, so much fantastic information, and thank you to Yop Music for the question. I just want to. There's just two more questions, and this one, Nicola. I think you got this when you posted an Instagram story. So, where do you draw the line between? And here, easiest digitation basically means fingers. Between fingering and your timbre and your phrasing, where do you draw the line between that? When you strike that balance?
I will never choose an easy dissertation just because it's easy. I think that's a mistake. I will always go for the best phrasing first, and second for the best tone. And then if it's easy, I'm happy it is. But yeah, let's say the line is as long as I can respect the phrasing I have in mind of that piece, of that moment. And yeah, as long as I can keep the phrasing, then I go to find some beautiful tone or something that makes me life easier.
Great. Okay, so let's this is the question that I'm very interested in, and Salomon Jacobson. By the way, Salomon, I love your Baroque improvisation video. Everyone should check out that video. It's very tasteful. He asks a great question, which is, are there any treatises or collections similar to, like, Fenaroli, Furno, but aimed at guitar-like instruments? Do we have actual publications where people are trying to teach counterpoint, basso continuo, partimento, but specifically aimed for the guitar? It seems like there's this gaping hole of pedagogy when it comes to composition specifically on the guitar.
Nicola would be the best to answer this question, I think.
Okay, I'll go with this. Historically, we have some little examples like the method of Kirkman, where he makes all the examples of Rodi octave. We have some Merz cadenzas, but also in the method of Molino. But these are not, let's say, methods on these things. Are just things like, there is a guitar method and there are some cadenzas. It is like a trace of historic evidence that a guitarist should be able to accompany, should be able to make a cadenza, not just to read a cadenza like we were trained. Okay, in the school we just read the cadenza, but if anyone will have asked me when I was 16, please make a cadenza in D major, I was, what is that? where's the score? And in modern times, I remember there was this book by Dusan Bogdan, which I admire a lot him as a composer. I played a lot of his music, and he wrote this book. It was Counterpoint for Guitar, which I read like maybe 10 times, but I was never able to apply this kind of book because I think was it's a beautiful book. It's beautiful. The idea of is trying to connect the, let's say, the essence of early music, the motivic mutation that we can find in the Ricercari and Fantasie for the lute, like in Doland, like in Francesco da Milano, Marco dall'Aquila. Is trying to reconnect this kind of a way of making music with a more modern way of making music in his own compositions. And in fact, he wrote a lot of things inspired by ancient lutenists, and doing this with also a jazz background and polyrhythmic structures. And I found super interesting the idea, but I was not able to, let's say, to use this book, which I have, and I tried to read really 10, 20 times. It was like every year I tried to read this book, but was not, let's say, something I could use. And I saw already maybe 20 years this book is out, and it didn't make the, let's say, the way should have done among the guitarists. I have the greatest admiration for Dusan Bogdanovic, but this book, I think, is not a really good example of how we can apply or how we can practice counterpoint and these kind of things. And as I said before, in the comment was, of course, Weiss should have studied practical counterpoint on the instrument. Yes, and so did, of course, Giuliani and Carulli and Soro. But I think they did this probably Soro on the keyboard, because when he was
Sor played the organ, right? Didn't he play the organ?
Yeah, in the organ. Because when you were into the school and he was in Montserrat, you should study these things on the keyboard. There was no guitar tutors. While both Giuliani and Carulli, they were cello players. So
interesting.
We can imagine they manage like we do today. We manage how to bring these ideas to the guitar, and of course they were amazing talents and they did great. And we can do our best to do mostly more or less the same things.
But even in Weiss's time, didn't they have any sort of what was it so patchwork when it comes to the guitar in terms of instruction?
For example, we know Bach had some lute students. In fact, let's say the lute suite by Bach, he didn't really write for the lute, but some of his students, they made arrangements of the E major suite, and the cello suite in G minor. So he was in contact with these lute players, but we have no testimony, no really real testimony of tutors for for practical counterpoint. For Theorbo, we have the book 3 of Kasberger that is just for Theorbo, and it shows a lot of diminutions for the Theorbo. How can improvise, how to go from one key to another key. We have some other. We have the New York manuscript with all the cadenzas with diminutions for the Theorbo, but there's not like a real method.
Wow, there it is. I mean, that's just reality then. So, I mean, I have to say I'm so grateful, and thank you, by the way, Solomon, for the question, and I'm so grateful for this amazing panel. I'd like to end off maybe final thoughts. We'll just go around. We'll start with Austin, then Nicola, and then Brandon. Final thoughts on Basso Continuo, Partimento, and just to leave the audience with a few things to wrap up the conversation. Austin, why did you go off first?
Yeah, I'll kind of piggyback off that last question, but I think the thing I would like to leave with is just, if you're wanting to learn how to play, the 18th, early 19th century style on the guitar, the best place to look at, because there's no treatises that are really full for the guitar, is to look at the music. So, and with that, you have to, it's not going to be like text saying, oh, here's this, do this, now, move to this. You have to be able to figure that out on your own. So the Giuliani, the Opus 1, I would say the first 3 parts are about technique and various things, but really the 4th part, I think, is like a lessons on style. They're not technically challenging, so they're good for a beginner, but they're really beautifully set, some basic compositional principles. So that would be a good place to start, because you can look, the counterpoint's really clear and it's really elegant and it's quite simple. So it's a great way to start to look at how to do this. But look at the repertoire. They figured that stuff out. Look at it, figure out what they did, and then extrapolate it out. So we have to do extra steps, but that's kind of the way things are for the instrument.
Yeah. Well, guitarists are nothing but resourceful, aren't we? Okay, so how about you, Nicola? Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I'm very happy that a lot of young guitarists are joining this topic. I understand that for all the colleagues is a bit difficult to accept that there are new things to learn. And I think is for everybody. When you are like a recognized teacher and you did all your career in a way, it's very difficult to to change way and to accept things that you didn't know. Yeah, I think it's very difficult to say I didn't know this. But I was a few weeks ago in Italy. We have a national congress for guitarists in Milan, and I was there presenting the book, and I was happy to see a lot of these, let's say, all these colleagues being happy to do. And I'm happy that in many conservatories they are starting these courses of basso continuo for guitarists,
Wow.
especially because also the lute classes are growing. So there is always like a continuo player in a conservatory that will give this course, and some guitarists are interested. So I think is talking about music education. I think we are in the starting of a moment that we can do very nice things, because for many years we've been taught the classical guitar as we were taught, a bit monolithic way to see the guitar and its music, and now we are a bit bored of this. I, I don't go anymore to a guitar concert if there is not something new. If I have to go and listen again and again the same, I don't know, Ponce Sonata and Bach Chacon, I don't go for that. But if I know that there is somebody who is improvising things, is bringing his own music, is bringing something new, there, yeah, I became excited as I was when I was 16. And I think the next thing can start in these years with new courses in guitar, and so many young guitarists joining this new way of looking at music and seeing that you can do things. You don't have just to play what is on the paper.
Wonderful. And Brandon, why don't you take us home? Let's wrap this up.
Yeah, I guess the message I would like to send out to guitarists specifically on the subject of basso continuo is one that I wish someone would have kind of like grabbed me and shook me and told me this. We have all of these amazing virtuoso guitarists who can play the Aranjuez concerto and do these amazing things musically and are craving for more. My message I want to send to everybody is, if you can do that, then basso continuo is easy. Technically, I mean, you won't need 10% of the virtuosity you need in basso continuo, but what you get to do is use your mind and then create, which is so much fun. And not only is it fun, it's the key to playing in orchestras and operas, traveling, playing concerts all the time. And so you can totally do it. You can pick up the theorbo, it's single strung, you can play with nails, you can use the same technique, but just put your pinky down or not if it's really causing you a problem. You can absolutely do it. You don't have to lose your nails. You can learn this. And one way to start this, just thinking like a basso continuo player, is just pick a key and just learn how to play 1, 4, 5, 1 in major and minor. And if every guitarist should be able to do that. And if you can't do that, then you're missing something about the fretboard. I have students who I say like, okay, they only know classical guitar, and I say play a C major chord, and they'll do something like, I don't know, like, just come on, just strum the campfire chord, it's C major, G major, it's just strum the guitar version. Don't think like a piano, so learn what the guitar does, which is strumming chords. And then actually you're already doing basically what you do on Baroque guitar, which is, yes, strumming chords like that. Sorry, I'm out of tune. But that's the gateway into playing with groups. And if you can play master's level classical guitar repertoire, then in a year you could be playing with groups, playing basso continuo, and it's so much fun. So there's not a crazy barrier there. You can absolutely do it. So and there's so much musical joy waiting for you there. So please explore this if you're at all interested.
Well, thank you so much to the panel, and it's really been really thrilling. We have to do more guitar panels. I mean, I was actually typing out some questions, but we just ran out of time. We'll have to do it again. It's been so many things that we can talk about, but we'll have to leave it here. Thank you so much to the panelists, and we'll see you everyone soon for the next episode. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.